Hey, I'm Carlos, and today I want to teach you about vibe coding. I created TweetFast entirely using AI, and I also built Cerebro entirely using AI. Cerebro is a production-ready platform that it is way beyond of usually what vibe-coded apps are. It is a very, very complex system, yet majority of the code it was written by AI. The reason for that is because I applied a couple of concepts that is basically what I want to teach you today. Majority of tutorials out there, they just basically jump into the tools without basically explaining why you're doing things. And I believe that is basically a very bad way of learning. What I want to give you today is basically the concepts and ideas behind creating a production-ready app. And so basically you can grab those ideas and apply to anything that you want to do. By the end of this masterclass, we are going to have basically a simple application that applies all of these things. And I'm going to make it super easy. But the main idea here is that I want you to grab these concepts and be able to apply it to anything else in the future. So we are going to go and we're going to troubleshoot things. We are going to basically plan before we build. We are going to look into how the code is structured and also the tools that I use and why. And along the way, I'm going to basically try to explain exactly why I'm doing something or why I'm asking the AI to do something. This is going to be super beginner friendly. So if you never touched code before in your life, or if you never vibe coded in your life, this is basically right for you. The things that I'm not going to cover today is going to be connection with Stripe and also doing user authentication. The reason for that is because one, those take a little bit longer to do, and two, with the concepts that I'm going to basically teach you today, you're going to be able to do that without a problem. So before we start, I just want to basically cover the boring stuff out of the way. And once you basically have these concepts done, it's going to be way easier for you to understand everything else moving forward. The tools that I'm going to be personally using today, it's going to be Claude Code. You can also use Cursor. In fact, I'm going to be using Claude Code inside of Cursor. And the other thing that you also might be able to do, or if you want to do it, is use the version of the equivalent of Claude Code from Google, that is Gemini CLI. Now, Claude Code is a little bit more advanced and it's less intuitive, but being less intuitive, the counterpart of that is that it makes less mistakes with the code. And for me, like, I rather just have like something that works really, really well in being less intuitive than something that will basically make me spend like more hours trying to debug that because the code, because just for the user experience. Cursor is way more user-friendly, but it's more prone to errors. The funny thing is that both of them, most of the time, you're going to use the same model, that is by Claude. I usually use just like the normal Claude Sonnet. Sometimes I use the Claude Opus, but both of them use the same. The main difference here is that Claude has a 200,000 tokens context window, sorry. What that means is that if you look at the token size, that's equivalent of around like 300 to 400 pages of context, of what the AI basically can get as a context in a single prompt. Cursor, on the other hand, they limit these 200,000 token contexts. Instead, what they do is they try to optimize that the max that they can. And then if you want basically to use these 200,000 tokens context, you need basically to use the max version. And we are going to look at that in a second. But that you pay more. That is not basically included into your monthly subscription. Now, with that out of the way, right now, Google Gemini is doing basically the same thing as Claude Code as a CLI. Google Gemini has a 1 million context windows, and it's completely free for now. So if you want basically to do that, the steps are going to be pretty much the same on any single tool that you use. Like the concept that I'm going to teach, they're going to work with any tool that you use moving forward. That's why I want to basically go over the concepts and not the tool. And yeah, so the first thing that we need to do is to go ahead and download Cursor. Now, Cursor is $20 per month, which is way cheaper. But again, if you use the max, that bill can be way higher. And then you can download Cursor, normal installation. I'm not going to go over installation because that's like literally just like how you install a software. The second thing that you need to do is download Node. Again, just go to nodejs.org and then go to downloads and download for your operating system, if it's Windows or Mac. And then for Claude Code, it's a little bit different. One, you need to have Node already installed before you get Claude Code. And then second, you need to basically copy this code in here. And you need to open your terminal on Mac or the CMD on Windows and then paste the code. Because I already have it installed, I won't do it, but that's basically what you need. In some cases, for Mac, these might not work because it doesn't have enough admin privileges. So what you do is you do this, you write sudo first, and then you paste the same code, you hit enter. It's going to ask you to add your Mac pin or code, and then you're good to go. So once it's installed, we basically have everything that we need. Before we jump into code, what I'm gonna do is just basically keep explaining you the concepts for now. Now, programming, you can think of it as kind of like Lego pieces. You basically have like two different areas of what you're doing, and not every single time you're going to use both. For example, the backend can just be a backend, and you can just basically use that backend for something that you want. One example of like a backend code that you can use is if you create a code, for example, to scrape businesses from Google Maps. For that in particular, you don't really need a front end because you can just basically use that on the backend. And then the front end is basically just like the beautiful part of the project, if you want to call it that way. It's like the GUI, the website, and so on. Now, I'm oversimplifying these concepts on purpose. But because I just want you to create this internal abstraction between one thing that basically creates a function and the other one that basically is just like a landing page, for example. So if you go over this, your backend basically is what runs on servers. It handles stuff like, for example, saving data, logging in the person, and for example, calling APIs and so on. That's your backend. Your frontend basically is what the user sees and interacts with. The backend, you can use Node, yes, the same Node that we just installed, or you can use Python and using FastAPI. That is the fastest one that you can use. The main difference between using Node and Python is that with Node, you can have, and we are going to look at this structure in a second, but with Node, you can have basically the entire backend and frontend in the same directory and in the same folder and file. While with Python, you're going to basically to spin up another, like a different code, and then you're going to have to basically publish that Python and use that API call for you to be able to get what is the benefit that you're doing. I can actually give you an example. Let's say that in both cases, we are using, for example, the OpenAI API key, right? If you do it using Python, what you need to do is basically you have like the Python code, and this is going to basically be hosted on a website, right? So you basically get, for example, mypythonCode.com/API/OpenAI, right? And then this actually needs to be hosted. That can be, for example, on Vercel, but this needs to basically be online. And then whenever you're using that in the code, it's going to call this API. And then because you call this API, and calling the API just means that you are requesting that API to basically to work, this code is going to work, and then it's going to then return it to your application, wherever is the transformation that you are asking for. So for example, if you're asking it to summarize a content, it's going to basically send it. And then once the Python basically summarizes that content, the result, it basically sends it back to your front-end application. So what that will look like is basically just like calling this. If you do it with Node, because you're basically using in the same app, then you don't really need to host this, because you can just basically call, for example, slash folder name of the API, because it's inside of the same application. Again, I'm oversimplifying this because I just want to understand the concept, and I don't want you to be like super, but there's like these multiple 100,000 use cases. In majority of the cases, this is basically what you're going to look for. Now, the front end, you basically have JavaScript that basically does something that is dynamic and responds. So for example, click into data. One example of using JavaScript is if you have a button, and on that button, every time that you click, you add a +1, then you use JavaScript to do this. HTML is basically for styling and static things, and then CSS is more even for styling. Now, when you get into JavaScript and so on, you're going to start basically looking into libraries, and that starts to basically get like super overcomplicated. So for this reason, what I'm basically going to just basically explain to you right now is, for example, you have TypeScript. It's just like the JavaScript, but with better errors handling and type safe. You don't really need to know all of that stuff for now. But for example, CSS, you have a bunch of libraries, like for example, Tailwind CSS, that is literally just CSS, but with more functions that make it easier for you to use it, or for things that come basically standard. Imagine it being like a package that already has a couple of like blueprints that by calling like a name, those blueprints automatically apply. So that's like the easiest way to explain that, and it just makes your job easier. In terms of we are going to go over the tech stack in a second, but in terms of a Next.js application, usually the structure is this, is the app route or source, and then you have index, which is, for example, in this case, is the home page. And then you also have, for example, subfolders. So subfolder. And then inside of this subfolder, you're going to have, for example, again, like a page.ts, right? And this is going to be another page. So what this does is whenever you access, for example, let's say website.com, then the website.com, you're going to see this index page. And then because this is organized in a folder, right, inside of this, whatever this folder name is, it becomes basically the page after. So if I do, for example, a slash like subfolder, then this is going to load this page here instead. Then you have like the API, but it's basically where you have all of your APIs and backend functions. And then you have components. Components is one of my favorite things about JavaScript. And the reason for that is because with components, you can build things that you can reuse in the app over and over and over again. For example, if you build a button styling, you can just basically reuse that button in like pretty much everywhere by just importing that button into that page. Again, I'm not going to go over the code for this for now. I just want to understand the concept. That's it. Super simple. You have a app folder, whatever it's in there, like as the main page, and then any subfolder, whatever you name it, is going to be basically another page on the website. For the tech stack that I use Next.js, TypeScript, Node.js, Shadcn UI, and Shadcn is, sorry, not this one, it's Shadcn UI. It's this, that is just basically a library that comes with a bunch of like components pre-built. So you have like an accordion component, you have alerts, you have like a dialog box, and you have like badges. You have just a bunch of things that come pre-built, and they're just easier to use. So you don't need to build those things from scratch. And if you look at here, you have like the usage, it's importing, and it imports like avatar and so on. The way that this works is if I go into the manual, you're going to see that, for example, as I was explaining in the code here, right, you have like the components, and you can see that this is in the components folder, the UI folder, and then the avatar folder, right? And then if I expand, you have like all of the code here that basically builds these here that you are seeing here. Now, if you want to use these in multiple different pages, instead of basically having to add this entire code like everywhere, this what you need to do is basically go in and import this into whatever page you want to use, and then add this simple line of code that basically uses this. That's it. It's that simple. Now that we have this in mind, we can actually start to go ahead and start coding the application. Before we actually go in, there are a couple of things that I want to go over and just like do and explain as a process. Again, the idea is that you actually can go in and build your full stack application and actually ship it. I don't want you to go in and be like, oh, I'm missing steps and so on. So what I want to basically do now is just spend some time and analyzing what it is that I want to build. For this one, I want to build something that is super simple. I want to build an app that whenever I add a text, I can use OpenAI API to then convert the text into a Old English or Shakespeare type of language. Right? So that's like the idea that I want to build. And the reason that I want to build this app in particular is because one, it's easy and fast to build, and two, it still teaches the concepts that I want basically to pass today. Now for this app, we are going to have basically the main page. And in this main page, I want to make it like super minimalist and have it where the person writes the text. And then when selected, we have a pop-up that allows us to transform. And then it animates and transforms. And then we also need a second page that in this second page, we are going to have the history that displays the original text. And this is going to allow us basically to go in and use the database as well and build something cool. So that's basically what we want to build. Now, it's really interesting that in this stage is basically where I want you to actually spend the most time. And I want you to think about like every single thing that you're going to have. So for example, is the history page going to have, for example, a search? Is it going to have, for example, by user, like search? Is it going to have filters? Like all of that is something that you need to, are things that you need to take in consideration, right? Now that we have this, what I'm going to do is I have a simple idea of basically what we want to build. And I'm just going to go and give you some tips in terms of designing, because usually AI is very, very bad at designing things. And I'm going to just give you a quick tip on a couple of things on how you can basically make it better and more consistent. So I was looking at a couple of designs for the app, and I actually like this one quite a lot. So what I want to do is I'm going just to copy this and paste it in Figma. And I'm not going to copy the entire design, but I like the colors, for example. So what I'm going to do is just create a frame. And then in this frame, I'm going to copy the background color, which is something that I like. And then I'm going to create an example. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and do this. And the design that I want for this is actually quite simple. For this page in particular, I'm gonna copy this color, which is not a pure black. And then for the history, I'm just going to say history. I'm gonna just move it here and then home. And then for this, I want actually to grab like a more orange-ish color. Cool. And then, so if you want, like, I'm gonna give you like a crash course on Figma right now. If you want to align things, for example, and make sure they are aligned correctly, you can just like shift and select both of them and do Shift A. And this is going to create what Figma calls an auto layout. And then you can adjust things, and you know that they are basically in that auto layout, and you can just like increase things. Another thing that Shift A works quite well for is for creating buttons. So for example, if I create this text, usually what people do in Figma is they create a box, right? And then they add the text on top, and then you can round the box, for example, right? So 15, and you can change, for example, the box color, right? That's basically what usually people do. Another way to do this is actually more precise, is you do Shift A, and then from here, because you have the auto layout, you can now fill the box. And then you still have the adjustment, for example, on everything. So you can still do like 15. And then you can use this here to increase the box and the size. And now you know that basically this is a precision-based layout. And for this app, we are not going to do like any sort of fancy buttons. So I can do, for example, I think that I just like do something really, really simple like this. And then we can just say subscribe. And I'm going to change the text color here, and we can move these to here. And again, select both, Shift A. And now you can see that we have like these that shows like the distance, but they are centered, aligned, right? So again, I'm not spending a lot of time on the design because what I want to have more in here is just the colors more than anything. Now for the text, I think I want something like a mono text for this in particular. So I'm gonna use this one, the space mono font. Same thing for this, space, oh, mono. Same here, space mono, and then same here. Now, of course, like you can go like super crazy with the design of everything. The reason I'm basically keeping these simple is because, again, I just want to teach you a very simple concept. That is, now let's have like a small idea of what the app looks like. And let's say that I want, like, as we write, like, or as the AI write, for example, we have like this more like dim color. What we can basically do now is we can start looking at this side of Figma and be able to create a design guide for the AI. So I'm just going to bring in a separate tool so it's easier for us to keep track of it. But we know that the font is space mono. In the Figma design, we use the font color 030301, and the font is not active or transforming, we use the color 8175, and the font size is 12 pixels. And then the next thing that we also have is for buttons and highlighted slash hover slash active state. We use this orange, which is FF3C00. And for the buttons, we use just a 1 pixel border color. And same thing, this as well as desktop background, we're using this color here. Now, what we are basically doing in this case is just basically preparing the AI to create our design system. And this works with anything that you want to do. For example, if I want to add in, like for this button, let's say I want to add like a background color of like yellow, and I want to add, for example, an effect that is a drop shadow. Even in the drop shadow, you can just say, I want a drop shadow, and then say like the position is 0, Y is 4, blur, like the blur is like 23, and the color is like a black at 25%. You can add all of these things into here, and it's just basically going to help you feed that to the AI. I'm going to go back, and I'm going to just like go into Excalidraw, and I'm going to basically copy this, which is like the app idea, and then this structure. And then I'm going to just say the top menu should have a subscribe button to the far right side, and have a home history. Okay, so for this, I want to use a Shadcn UI, TypeScript. We want to use Next.js, Node, and Supabase as the database. Now that we have basically the tech stack that we want to use, the next thing that we are going to need for this is explain, probably here. We already explained it here. Okay, so I'm going to basically copy all of this, and I'm going to go into Claude. And I'm going to just like paste this that we basically built now, and say, build me a PRD for this. And let me actually change, because I was just like typing super fast. I just want to go in and say that this is actually Shakespeare. Cool. And then just like send it. You can see like a very simple prompt, but we kind of give everything that we need for now. And it's going to create a PRD, which is a text that basically explains to the AI what is it we are doing, the animations and the front end, primary, and so on. Now, as you basically start building these things and evolving, you're going to start figuring out that a lot of things that you want to do or you want to build, you can already find that someone that already did it. For example, one of these examples is Shadcn UI. There is a bunch of things that have already been done. Another example, for example, is Framer Motion. That Framer Motion is just basically a library that already has like a bunch of like cool different types of animations. Another one, for example, is Magic UI, for example, that also has a bunch of like components that they are already pre-built and pre-made for you, right? So you have like the hero video, bento grids. In fact, if you remember, like we actually used this on TweetFast. You have like cycling orbs. So you have like a bunch of these libraries that you can already use, that they have like good design systems. And as you basically start building those things, I always go in and I even ask, for example, you can ask, for example, Claude, what are things that would like work really well for this type of projects. Now you can see that it basically creates the structure, right? It says like you have like the source and you have like the app, and then inside of the app you have like the page, which is like the main page, the transformation page, in this case the home page. Then you have like the history page, which is like once you go to history, that's basically where we take you to. And then you have like all of the components that we need, and then we have like the libraries that we are going to use. In this case, this is basically using libraries interchangeably with API. It's basically the same thing. It's going to be basically just the OpenAI API. And then the types, that is for TypeScript. You're going to see that we have, for example, this code here. This is called a SQL code. Sorry, I was talking about like libraries, just like libraries to import. The API is actually here for the Next.js API routes for history, transformation, and so on. Like this one is going to call, for example, the user from Supabase. This is the one that's going to use OpenAI to transform the text and so on. So it created a subscribe API, but we don't really need it. We also don't need a usage API, so I'm going to remove that from the document once we have it there. It already created the prompt for us, so it transformed the following modern text into Shakespearean Old English, for example, which is actually pretty good. I'm good with that. But going back to the SQL, I'm sorry, I'm just like doing this in real time. The SQL code is basically what you usually would use to go in and add the code to Supabase. So I'm going to go ahead and create a Supabase account. So once I create the Supabase account, I can just go in and create a new project. So I'm gonna blur these out, but that looks good. And then create project. Now, once I create a project, you're going to see that we're going to get this project URL and we're going to get this API key. You need basically to save both of them. So for now, I'm just going to save them here. So project URL and project API. We don't need to do anything with it for now, but this is good for us to save it in here. Now, if I go back to Claude, you're going to see that we have like this SQL code. If I copy this code and I go into SQL editor, and then I just basically go into new SQL snippet and I add this here. Actually, before that, let me go to database. Let me go to tables. You're going to see that like our tables are empty, right? You can manually create them. If you go to SQL and I run this, it's going to say success, no rows returned. If I go back to the tables, you're going to see that now we have all of our tables here. We have the usage tracking one, we have the transformation table, we also have the subscription table. So what this does is every single time that we basically create a text is going to save the original text in this table and the transformed text in this table. I want to show you a different way of doing this that is actually way easier than having to paste these all the time. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just like ask, I've added the SQL, but please give me to delete tables. This is going to give me another SQL to just delete all of the tables that we created. Then once this is done, just going to go over here and I'm going to run this SQL again. And it's going to have a warning because it's a destructive behavior. And if I go back, the tables should be deleted. Cool. Now that we have this all done, we have the PRD. It's time for us to start building. It is the fun part of doing this. I'm going to go ahead and I have basically a cursor open and adjust the window. And I'm going to go ahead and create a new project. So for you to do that, you just like click on Open Project, and then you click on New Folder, and you just like name it. For this one, I'm just going to move it to here. I'm going to call it Scribe and create, then open the folder. Now, it's interesting that like before you start coding, I highly recommend you to go into GitHub and on GitHub create a new repository. And here is basically going to call this Scribe, going to make this private, create repository. You don't need to do anything for now, but keeping like this is going to be your friend in a second. One thing that I recommend you doing is going over into GitHub desktop and downloading this. What this will do is it will basically install this in here. And then once we publish our code, the code is going to show on the side here. Then you can just basically clone that code into your local, and you can do some really cool things with it that I'm going to show you in a second. For those that don't understand what Git is, Git basically allows you to, if I go over to Cerebro, to create a version control of everything that you do. So for example, all of these branches are just like tests that we've done in the code without affecting the main code. And without basically, if that basically is interesting to have, because if you do a code that has some sort of a bug and you can basically solve that, then you can just basically revert back. And the same thing happens, for example, by pushing code. So for example, today, 3 hours ago, I pushed the code for programmatic SEO. And if I click in here, you're going to see that we have like a bunch of different commits to the code. And this highlights basically the files that have been changed. So right now it changed 25 files. And basically every single commit that we have. If something happens, for example, and something breaks, I can always go back and revert back to another one. By just basically giving the commit code in here, I can just, for example, go into ChatGPT and say, hey, write me a Git code for me to revert back to this commit that I know that it's working. So it's important for you to have a good history on GitHub and a good commit history so you can always revert back, or you have like again, something to save your code from. Now I'm gonna basically show you how you can do this in a couple of minutes as well. Now, cool. Let's go back to Cursor. And now we have our Scribe folder in here. Now, if you never use Cursor, Cursor basically works like this. You can just like in the chat here on the side, you can just like type as you would chat with any other AI and be able to ask it to do things. So for example, create me a .md file that says hello world. And you're going to see that Cursor is going to basically be able to go in. It says, oh, I want to create a hello world. It's going to create the file, right? So it creates basically this file for us. The cool thing about Cursor is like, for example, if I say, now write a paragraph about how Carlos is awesome. So it's going basically to understand that I'm still talking about the same file, and it's going to write the paragraph. The cool thing about Cursor that Claude doesn't has is that it has this restore checkpoint, that if I don't want this change or if something is broken, I can simply click in here. It's going to revert back to where it was before, and then you can try it again. This is bad, right? So Now it's going to go and basically just do that again. Right, so you understand the idea. Like the cool part about Cursor is that it can go and it can literally just like go back and forth and so on. Now on Cursor, you can select, for example, either the agent, and then you can select the modes, right? So you're going to see that we are using, for example, Cloud for Sonnet. And the thing is that it doesn't use the full 200,000 context window. If you actually read it here, it says it's going to use like 120K context window. And the max version, which is this one, now it's going to use the full 200,000 context window. One thing that I found is that with Claude, it actually has way less mistakes on building things than using Cursor does. And I think that the thing behind that is the prompt engineering behind Cursor that causes that to happen. Now, for the rest of this, I'm going to use Claude Code, and I'm going to also teach you a couple of really cool tricks for Claude Code. Now, we are going to basically go in and click on the very top and click on terminal. It's going to open the terminal here. And I'm just going to say Claude. And if we installed it earlier, you're going to see that now Claude is going to run. Now, it also has like this small run Claude. Hey, Carlos from the future here. Just want to show you something really fast that I forgot to show in the tutorial about Claude Code. One thing that you can do is you're going to see, for example, I don't have any chat in here, but usually on Cursor, you have a chat history. It's going to show every single chat that you have. Claude Code, you can also do that. So for example, you can see like the chat that we have in here, but if I close this chat and I just do, for example, Claude again, it's going to basically start fresh. There's actually a way for you to revert that and get that chat by doing Claude and then -- continue. Is a way of doing that. You're going to see it's basically going to grab the same one. Another way that you can do it is, I just have these shots, so I'm going to start a new one, which is Claude, and say, just go ahead and say hi. In the middle of any Claude session, I just like going to say hi again. I can just basically do, for example, /resume, and then it's going to ask me to select the conversation that I want to resume. In this case, I want to resume the previous one, but it's this one. I just wanted to share this because I forgot to share that in the tutorial. And this is a super useful feature because sometimes you want basically to go back into the conversation, you want to basically resume your work, and that's a way for you to do that. Another thing is if you do /init, for example, it's going to create a claude.md file that allows you to go in and like Claude is going to read your entire documentation and create its own Claude file to understand basically what is that is your goal and what is it you're doing. And another one that is super useful that I use all the time is basically two things. One is using the keyword ultra-think. I think that this one I do share in the tutorial, where it's basically talking about basically Claude is going to think longer about that problem and get a better solution. And the other one is you can actually tell Claude to use multiple agents, and you can just use plain English to this. And whenever Claude Code is creating the tasks, it's going to spin basically an agent for each task. Instead of completing one by one, it's going to go in and complete like all of the tasks in parallel and having different Claude codes basically being used. One thing that you need to basically be careful about that and pay attention to it is that is going to consume more tokens. Yep, that's it. Go back to the tutorial now. Code in here. But I prefer to use this in the terminal because you can drag and drop files into here. So you can drag and drop, for example, an image into here, and it's going to be able to look into it, while if you do it through here, for some reason, it doesn't work. Now, we are going to go ahead and create and install the MCP server for Cursor, for Supabase. And the reason for that is because if we install the MCP server, we are going to allow Claude to have access to Supabase. So instead of us basically being here and pasting this code manually, Claude is going to be able to basically create the tables for us and to be able to build those things for us from the get-go. So what we need to do in this case is just basically go in and search for the Supabase CP server, and we are going to find this or the other one. This is just like the explanation. And then going to click in here, and what we need to get is basically this. If I go back to the other documentation, you're going to see that they have a way to install for each one of these projects. You have like the cursor one, you have Windsurf, and then you have Visual Studio Code, Client, and Cloud Desktop, and Claude Code. So what it says here to do is to open the project and create a .mcp.json file. So we're going to go ahead and do that. I'm going to go into here. I'm going to create a new file, .mcp.json, and I'm going to delete this one because we don't need it. Move to trash. And then we need to basically on macOS, Windows, and so on, we need to copy this. And you're going to see that we have a couple of things in here. The first one is read only. We don't want to have the read only because in this case, it's just basically going to allow Claude to read. So we want to delete this because we want to allow Claude to be able to go in and actually write code there. The second thing it's going to say is the project reference. For the project reference, you can go back into your project. You're going to see it like in the URL, you have like this here, which is like the /project, and then you have this part here in the URL. You can just copy it and then go back. You can delete this and add your project. And then you need your Supabase access token. Now, if I go back to the documentation here, they should have a place that shows the access token. So access token, probably here, Supabase settings, access token. Then you can just like generate a new token. Just going to say demo tutorial and generate the token. So, okay, we get the token, we copy it, and then go back to cursor and paste it here, save. Now, the thing about the MCP in this case is that we need to restart Claude Code for it to work. So I'm going to basically do this and open terminal again, say Claude, and it's basically going to say, hey, use this MCP server in this project, say yes, and now it has access. One thing that you need to do is just like, you can just like check if it's working or not. You can just say, I have a Supabase MCP, please check if it's working. And then like Claude Code just going to be able to test it out, right? So just going to create the lines, and then it's going to test the configuration by creating like a get URL and proceed. And so, yeah, great, it's working. So it's checking, it's asking to check if there is any available tables. I'm just going to cancel this for now because we don't have any tables. Now, cool, now that we have that, we can go back into here and go back into this. Now, the thing about like creating a PRD is that I highly recommend you actually going through it and reading the PRD, because you're going to find a couple of things that you don't actually need if you don't basically go super in depth into it. One thing that we are going to do is just like copy this, then go back into here, do a prd.md, and then we are going to paste this here and save it. Now I basically have almost like everything that we need to be able to go in and build this up. One thing that I want you to keep in mind is that as you build this, if you want to basically work on a new feature or work on something different, I highly recommend basically working on feature by feature and basically working on building a PRD for each feature that you need, because that way you are able to just make sure that it's the best standard process, like the best standard that you can do in terms of like having Claude helping you come up with that solution. Now we have this. One thing that I want to do is I'm going to go into Figma. I'm going to go back for this. I'm going to just like take a screenshot of the app. So So grab this, and I'm going to go into cursor. I'm going to drag and drop these into the terminal. I'm going to say due to Next.js app, and as a visual similar to this, and also use, and we can use here a at, and then it's going to show the documents that we have at the PRD for us to complete. Now, if you do Shift and Tab, you're going to see that you can basically toggle between these different modes. So for example, plan mode, you have auto accept on edits, and so on. So I'm going to basically go into plan mode. And one trick that you can use for Claude is use ultra think, basically for you to use the reasoning model and for you to make the AI think for longer. So I'm going to do this, and I'm going to say, I also want you to already commit this to, we're going to go to our GitHub, and I'm going to open, the scribe that we have. I'm going to just basically paste these in here and create. And I'm gonna hit enter. And what it's going to do now is it's going to look into the screenshot. It's going to look into the PRD, like the entire PRD that we have, which I just made a mistake because I wanted to eliminate some things from the PRD, but it's fine. I want to, if you remember, I wanted to remove the subscribe, but like for now it's fine. It's okay. And then it's going to ask me for permissions to read. I'm just going to say yes, and like don't ask me to do that again. So that basically Claude can just basically do that without me having to go in and approve that every time. Now, whenever it's just like writing code and doing this, I'm going to pause the video so it doesn't get like super long for no reason. And then as soon as it's done, I'm going to resume the video. But you can see that basically what it's doing now is like thinking through the problem and trying to understand what it's basically needs to do. It's going to look into every single part of the structure of this. Then again, this just asks me for use a command. I'm just going to say yes, don't ask me to do that again. And now that it's done, it's going to basically say, here's the current directory, like what's happening, there is no code yet. And then it basically understands what we need to do. So it says like next steps will be initialize the Next.js with TypeScript, set up the folder structure that is outlined in the PRD, install necessary dependencies, create the database schema in Supabase, implement the core, and so on. One thing that I want these to do, and I'm just going to say no, keep planning, is I want to go into the open platform, into the docs model. And for this one in particular, I want to use the ChatGPT 4.10 mini. And I can just basically copy this and go back and say, one thing I forgot is that I want to use this OpenAI model. Now, one other thing that you are going to need to do if you want to use to basically build an application that uses stuff from OpenAI is you're going to have to go into OpenAI, create an account in the platform, and then create an API key. So I'm going to do that now. So once you create an account, you can go into the dashboard. And then the first thing that you need to do is basically go into settings first, and then go into billing. And then you need basically to add money to the balance. And then the second thing is go into API keys, and then you can create a new one. I'm going to delete this one, just like create another one. So temporary key. It's going to use a default project. I'm going to add this, copy this key, and then again, same way that we have like this in here, it's going to say OpenAI key and add here. We are going to need this in a second for everything that we do, and you're going to understand how we do that or how we use it. Cool. One other thing that I want to do is just want to say, before you continue, give me the .env file, a structure that you're going to use /need. So the .env file, or the environment file, is basically where we will set our environment variables, which in this case is going to be these API keys that we have in here. And the reason that we do that is, for example, if we go, for example, inside of the code and we do like API key, and then we add, for example, our OpenAI API key here directly in the code, then this is very dangerous, because if the code gets leaked, if something happens, then people can get access to this key, and they can basically use your key and your money. So instead, what we do is we create a .env.local file for the local file, and then for the once we deploy the app is going to be, we don't need to create this, but we need to still add the keys. But in the app itself, instead of doing this, what we're going to do is going to have key, and then we're going to have, something like this, right? So OpenAI key. And now, even if the code is leaked, this is protected because the key is now inside of the .env file that people don't have access to it. So just a way for you to protect your keys, and also for you to create the connections, because, for example, for Claude Code to be able to know what your Supabase is, you need basically to give it the reference and so on. So I'm going to basically grab this .env file that it gave me. And we don't need majority of these, to be honest. So I'm just going to do a .env.local, and I'm going to paste it. And the ones that we need from here is just going to be this. So now I'm going to go ahead, grab the OpenAI key and change it here. And I'm going to go ahead and grab the next public URL. So this one. And then I'm going to go ahead and grab the project API, which is this. And we don't need this. We can just save. If you are in doubt, you can just basically go back into here. You can go into API keys. You're going to have like the service role key, which is that one. And then the anonymous key, which is this one we just pasted. And we are good to go. So now that this is done, I can just say Frontend is created. Let's create project. And I'm going to just like move and click on Shift Tab twice, so I have on auto accept edits, hit enter, and now we can just basically allow the AI to go in and start building the project. The cool thing about like Claude Code that is different from Cursor is that Claude Code basically creates its own to-do list, as you can see in here. While on Cursor, it just basically goes in and does what you ask it to do. However, like you can actually ask Cursor to go in and create its own to-do list and then keep track of things. But Claude Code does that by default, and I feel that it's like always like way better. I'm gonna basically, it's trying to create a new app. It's going to say use this npx app to create. So I'm going to just say yes, and ask me to do that again. You're going to see it's going to have like a couple of errors. The cool part about this is that it's going to be able to just like fix its own errors as it goes. And now it's going to start creating like the package.json and just like create all of the code on its own. So I'm just going to let this run and accept everything that it tells me that it wants to do. And then I'm going to get back once this is done. So as you can see, like the first part is done, and it's going to move into the second to-do list, which is installing the dependencies. That's done. I'm setting up the project folder and structure. You're going to see it's going to start to populate a bunch of like different folders in here. You can say, yes, you don't need to ask that again. It created basically the app folder, components, library, history folder, types. So it's just basically creating everything that we need. Again, just going to pause this for a second and then get back to it once it's done. One thing I want to show you is that because we connected the MCP, you're going to see it says Supabase apply migration MCP. And then you can see this basically running an SQL on here, and then it says success true. So if I go back to my Supabase and I go to tables, you're going to see that it creates the tables. And that was entirely Claude Code doing it, and not basically me going in and pasting the SQL in here. That's why like setting up the MCP server, even though it's a bit time consuming, it just saves a lot of time, and it's also easier for you to go in and troubleshoot it. Now, one thing that I want you to know is that me personally, even though I use Supabase, I use the self-hosted version of Supabase because it's free and I have like my own server. And the self-hosted version, it doesn't has an MCP. So a workaround that you can do is work on this free version of Supabase that has an MCP. And then if you want to use like a your own hosted Supabase, you can just basically export the SQL and add to your own MCP server. Sorry, in your own hosted server. Now it's basically creating everything. It's not creating the library. It's creating the prompt, the everything that we need. So you can see we basically went through the entire checklist, and now it's asking me to initialize the git push on git repository. I'm going to say yes, so it will initialize the git. It seems that I probably didn't catch that, but it's setting up the authentication with Supabase. The reason I'm basically going to ask you to skip that is because right now, like if you want to basically have the authentication process, we need to go in and set up like a resend API key and so on. That's going to make this a bit more long than it needs to be, because you need to set up like a resend key for it to send the email. So I might just skip that part and make this super easy. Now we have like the main branch being created, origin. And if you go in and you see, right now we don't have anything in here. And then once that's done, and we have it done now, and we have like the app here created. Now, if I go back and I go into the GitHub and like the GitHub, and I open something from local and I open scribe and add repository, you're going to see we don't have anything in here, right? Like if I go to Claude Code, watch what happens. If I go, for example, into like here, and I just like type something, I'm just going to type, right? That's an error, that's a mistake. Now remember that I was telling you that cursor has the restore checkpoint. While Claude Code doesn't, there is something that you can actually do about that, which is if you have like the desktop, I'm gonna save this because I didn't save. You're going to see that it basically shows the change history of the file. If there is a change that you don't want, you can just basically right click and say discard change, and it's going to clear that out. So that's a way for you to do that. And then now that we have this committed, if you just want to commit it again, we can just basically, I'll show you in a second. So okay, this is now saying that it's done and please visit the local host. So I'm going to go into localhost 3000 and you're going to see it has nothing there. So what I'm going to do is go in and do like npm install, then npm run dev, and now we have the local host running, and I can reload this and we have an error. So that's normal. Just like copy the error and go back into Claude Code and paste the error. And you can just like let Claude Code try to fix that, try to figure out how to. So it's fixed, and if I try to reload it, still having the same issue. Let me try to close this and do a npm run dev again, and it's fixed. So we can type and we can transform all. We have a couple of issues, which is I don't really like this that we have, and the text is too small. So I want to just like tell Claude Code to fix that. So I'm just going to use ultra think again for it to go in and think more about this. If we go to history, we don't have any transformations. If you go to home, yep, it already increases the text. And now we're going to try to see this. Good. So that's what we were looking for. Now I'm going to just paste a text in here. Like there is something that is happening, and hopefully, okay, which is like, this is like we'll just like take a screenshot and go to here. I want to let it finish first because it's still working on it. But right now it's too boxed, so I didn't fix that. Right now the text area is too slim, make it. Okay, so now it's wider, but it's not centered. So I took another screenshot and I'm just going to say, I want it to always be horizontally centered in the viewport size. Let's see if it will fix it. And these like the small battles with AI is like most of the time is more of the UI than the actual functionality. It's a slightly more centered, but still not there. Let me try to update. I mean, it's fine. We can adjust this later. Let's try to check the content and just like write something here as a gen alt. Oh, and I get it why it's not centered, because the transform all button is like super screwed. So let me go in and take a screenshot and say, hey. So this is basically like vibe coding, right? It's just like you adjust things, you tell the AI to do things, and that's it. You explain to the best of your ability. It's basically fixing the layout structure now. We have transform all button here. Cool. Now let's test it and click on transform all. This is calling the API, and there you go. It transformed into Shakespearean text. Now if I go to history, we have the history here and working. Cool. Now if I go to home, I want to like do something fun just for the sake of this video. I want to do it where I want to download this image, and I'm going to go into upload thing. Okay, so I'm gonna go into upload thing. I'm gonna go to dashboard. I'm just going to go here, files, upload, and I'm going to upload that Shakespeare image and upload it. And I'm gonna say, I'm gonna copy the URL, and then I'm going to go here and say, okay, when the text is transformed, I want you to overshow these image of the ghost Shakespeare and slightly animated using framer motion as if it was a ghost flying smoothly. I use some Bezier animation for this image URL. Yeah, just like adding one more feature just for the fun of it. And we have the code completed. And now if I go in and I hover, you're going to see I have like the ghost of Shakespeare. Okay, so now we are able to go in and publish the app. One thing that we can do, and usually just ask Claude Code to do this instead, is ask Claude Code to run a build. And the reason for that is because usually when you do it through the terminal, you're going to find errors that you don't know how to solve them. And the other problem is that a lot of times, for example, the app is going to be working quite well in the local host, but then when you add that app to a hosting service like Vercel and so on, it's going to return an error and not work. For you to basically preemptively avoid that, you just basically ask Claude to run a build. Please run a build and check for any errors. You're going to see that it's going basically to run a npm run build, which you just like did in here. And then it's going to say, yes, don't ask me to do the, for approval again. You're going to see that it's going to run the build. And if it doesn't find any issues, awesome, which in this case it didn't. But sometimes if it finds an issue, it's going to go in and basically ask for you to fix. One other thing that I want to show is this. Can you please add an error on purpose? And so I can catch error in the console. I'm doing a tutorial and want to show people. I'm just going to ask Claude to do an error on purpose. So it's going to do like a small internal, which is this one. Now I'm gonna cancel the build. But usually the idea here is that sometimes you're going to encounter like the app not working, something that you can't basically figure out how to fix. And what you need to do is like click on inspect and go over to console. It's going to have the error here. So say to my friend, I'm going to ask you to transform and see what is the, for some reason there is like no error. 1 second. Okay, so you're going to see that we have like either the issue here, or if you do, for example, the inspect and go to console, you're going to have the issue here, right? So whenever you find like errors or something is not working, always check like the console and see if there is something in there that is causing these problems. So I can, and then you can just basically copy the error and get it back and add it to cursor. But because I asked you to do it, I'll just say, okay, tutorial done, clean up the error. It's just going to fix that for us. Cool. So now that this is done, and now that the build is done, usually whenever you have to commit, you either have to ask how to commit, or you need to do, for example, a git that add, and then just like do a bunch of different code. You can also go into, I don't even know where that is in here, like somewhere in the IDE that allows you to do that. With the GitHub desktop, you're going to see that we have like all of the files that we have in here, and we just basically can write what we've done. So tutorial done, and commit files to main, and then push origin. And now if I go into here, you're going to see like the last commit was like 28 minutes ago. If I reload it, like it's now. And it only adds the files that actually had some sort of a change, because the other ones are good, right? So you're going to see that like whenever we do this, the .env file is not here. So now it's time for us to publish the app to the web so other people can access and use it. For this, I'm just going to use Vercel. And if I go to Vercel, let me close this. And I'm going to go add new and add a new project. You're going to see that I have like all of my projects here connected. You just click on import. It's going to ask to import scribe. And then you have like the environment variables. So if I go back to cursor and I go back to env.local, I copy this and then I just like paste and then click on deploy. Then it's going to start basically building up the project. So you're going to see like the deployment start, and it says like crafting, optimizing the build. Usually it takes around like a minute. Sometimes it can take up to 5 minutes to deploy something. Like for example, if I go into where I usually deploy my own projects, which is Coolify. On Cerebro, for example, I had a deployment today that it took 5 minutes to deploy and 4 minutes, but like Cerebro is a very, very heavy application. It's an application that has a lot of features, and that's basically why. So done, it's deployed. If I continue to the dashboard, now I have a URL that I can access the app online, and we can test. Hey, this is the end of the tutorial. Hope you liked it and it was useful. Then transform all, then we can see our little ghost again. And that's it. That's the tutorial. One quick thing is I'm going to basically be giving you this file of this project. I have one small ask to do, which is I'm building a small community for indie hackers and vibe hackers that want basically to just like learn these things, share what they're doing, and build an audience. Right now, it's in very, very early stage. I'm basically still testing and building. I'm adding some gamification elements and so on. So I'm going to change the name to Vibe Hackers instead of Indie Clubhouse. And I want to notify you if you find this useful. I want to notify you once this is done so you can join the community early. If you want to get the files of this tutorial and a cheat sheet and everything that we've basically covered today in a small PDF. I just basically ask you to go ahead and subscribe to the newsletter below. I don't really send that many emails. I don't really have the newsletter active. I just basically want to collect a couple of emails for people that they find this stuff useful. And I'm going to basically just like shoot you an email once this is done. Now, one other thing that I'm going to start doing, and if you want to subscribe to the channel, I'm going to start basically showing the behind the scenes of building in the Clubhouse. And yeah, that's basically it. That's the tutorial. That's the ask. Thanks very much. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. And if you have any questions, if there is anything that is not clear, let me know in the comments, and I'll be here to help you out and answer any of your questions. And yeah, thank you very much for watching, and I can't wait to see what you build.